Hello, welcome to the second lesson in this GCSE series on how to analyze and look at the characters and the themes in A Christmas Carol. If you're doing A Christmas Carol for your GCSEs, whether you're sitting the exams in a few weeks or you're a year 10 or year 9, just trying to sort of brush up ready for Doomsday, hopefully there's going to be some useful stuff in here for you. So last week we went through Ebenezer Scrooge, obviously the main character in A Christmas Carol. And if you haven't seen that video, I highly recommend you go back and watch it. It's in the YouTube channel, it's in the Discord. Today, we're going to be covering the ghosts as a collective, lots to get through. So hopefully this will be really useful for you. We're going to do a brief description of the 4 major ghosts, and then we'll do some sort of key quotes. And then we'll try and finish the lesson as usual by sort of pulling it all together in a model paragraph. So let's start with the first ghost, which is not the ghost of Christmas Past, technically. It's the ghost of Jacob Marley. So he represents warning to Scrooge, a warning, a danger to Scrooge. So there's this kind of interesting symmetry. So it starts with a warning to Scrooge, which he doesn't take that seriously to begin with. He says about Jacob Marley, like, you're probably just a bit of undigested beef. And, he's not very nice to the ghost of Marley to begin with. And then towards the end, he becomes more convinced that maybe the ghost of Marley really is there and really is actually trying to warn him. And it's symmetrical because it finishes, obviously, the ghost of Christmas Future also represents warning and fear. So now, it starts with this warning, it finishes with the warning. By the ending, obviously, you've got Scrooge just like down on his knees, just like begging the ghost of Christmas Future, please give me another chance. I'll do anything. Please, please, please. Right. So it starts and finishes with a warning. And then there's some like slightly friendlier ghosts in the middle, I guess you might say. He's also what you might consider the canary down the mine for Scrooge. What I mean by that is Jacob Marley was very similar to Scrooge when he was alive. So looking at Jacob Marley's fate is very similar to looking at his own fate. If he doesn't change his ways, if he doesn't come round from what he's done, then there's a good chance he'll be bound in chains forever, wandering the earth, the same as Jacob Marley. And this, of course, is a representation of hell. The idea of that is a representation of hell. Jacob Marley is also quite a dynamic kind of little character, because we see that he wants to change. He wishes that he could go back and change the decisions he made in his life. He's full of what's called lamentation, regret. He wishes that he could go back and change it. He also, in some ways, represents hope, not for himself, but at least for Scrooge, because he can see Scrooge. He says to Scrooge, I don't know how I can see you. I've often been here in your home trying to warn you, but I couldn't see you before. But that gives a sense of hope. For some reason, there's a little bit of hope that maybe Scrooge wouldn't have to have the same fate as Marley. I'm sorry about the camera. I only just realized that the camera had gone off. So I'm just letting that reload. Hopefully the video was still useful for a minute there. So the other thing about all of the ghosts is they're what are called static sidekicks. So they're static deuteragonists. Okay, I'm back. Good. Static deuteragonists, which means that they're there really as a warning. They do affect the plot. That's an important thing with the deuteragonist, because they do push the plot forwards through Scrooge and his transformation. But yeah, they're secondary sidekicks. So that's Marley. Then we've got the Ghost of Christmas Past. So he represents hope and memory. So there's a hope for Scrooge, because as we go back through Scrooge's childhood, we go back for him being an apprentice with Fezziwig. We go back, obviously, through the pain of his breakup, which kind of explains maybe why he became a bit more like he was. All of this represents a kind of hope that in his memory, he will remind himself of the man he used to be and become more like that man again. And that then will transform him, because he wasn't always this miserly old git. He was in the past a kinder man, someone who did show some emotion and was a better person. So that's what the Ghost of Christmas Past represents. And I think that this section with the Ghost of Christmas Past, in this second stave, we get more of a sense of kind of sympathy, I guess, for Scrooge, because, for example, he did have a pretty bad upbringing. He was at a boarding school, and he didn't seem to be treated very well. He was quite isolated, sat in classrooms or sat in his room in the boarding school reading books, and the books were the closest to friends that he had. So I do think we feel a little bit sorry for Scrooge through The Ghost of Christmas Past as well. And we start to understand a bit more about why Scrooge is this anti-hero, right? This kind of, slightly villainous, flawed character, but why he's damaged and why he is the way he is. Then we have The Ghost of Christmas Present. I think that The Ghost of Christmas Present is probably the ghost which most represents Christmas as a theme and as an idea, and the joy that comes from that. Obviously, there's this picture of him. He's this enormous guy in a big green robe and holly and food and everything. And I think you could also see him, I'll just add this in, as a bit of a prototype for Father Christmas as well. Because Father Christmas obviously is this big, jolly, giant kind of a guy with some supernatural powers, very generous, obviously delivers toys, all that good stuff. So there's this abundance. And the reason that he's important is because I think he's there to sort of remind Scrooge of how things should be. Christmas should be a time of joy and giving and abundance. And so the scenes that The Ghost of Christmas Present show to Scrooge are all scenes which help to kind of encourage his abundance back, to encourage him to go back to generosity instead of scarcity. So we start with that market scene, and all of the fruits and vegetables are personified, and it's almost like a Black Friday kind of shopping scene. There's people like clambering all over each other to grab their turkeys and their potatoes and their fruits and their whatever shopping ingredients to get their Christmas meal together. But it's all very abundant and full of life and flavor and joy. And then we have all of the different, I've said singers, I didn't mean it to be singers, all of the different people singing in all different parts of the world. So you've got the miners, you've got the sailors, you've got the two men that are in the lighthouse in the middle of nowhere. And they're all like full of merriment and joy of Christmas season, and wishing each other Merry Christmas and being friendly and kind to one another. So again, this is the abundance and the joy of Christmas. And then we have Fred. So Fred, he's throwing this big Christmas party scene. And Fred, obviously, we've seen in the first Dave, is this really solid guy. Like, he's a really good man. And he's full of just the abundance and joy of Christmas that you would expect, really. And he's challenging Scrooge and saying, why aren't you, join us for Christmas, uncle? Like, just come along. And then we see this big Christmas party that he throws, and they're all playing games and having some food and having some drink and just having a good time. And this is another place where we see a huge transformation in Scrooge, because he actually asks the Ghost of Christmas Present, just can you give me another half an hour, Spirit? Can you let me just stay here and watch the party, please, Spirit? So you start to see this transformation. He's becoming convinced again of how he needs to become more of an abundant, generous person. Not the guy in Stave 1 who was chasing the Christmas caroler with a ruler, scaring the poor boy to death, telling the charity worker, I'm not going to give any money to charity. If you're poor, you should be in jail, or you should just starve to death and get rid of the surplus population. So Christmas Present, very important. Finally, Christmas Future. So he represents warning and fear. Like I said, there's a symmetry, because it starts with warning and fear with Jacob Marley, goes to Jacob Marley, and now it finishes with warning and fear again. Ghost of Christmas Future is terrifying. He's not like Christmas Present, who was quite jolly and amiable and someone you'd probably want to hang out with. It just seemed like a, Father Christmas, like I said. He's not like that at all. He's all dressed in black and skeletal and more like Death. He looks a bit more like the Grim Reaper or Death, right? We see that in this image. Maybe if I make the image a bit bigger, since I can. Yeah, so he's just like a spectre of death, basically. And he also represents judgment and justice. So, he shows Scrooge the judgment that Scrooge really deserves for the terrible life, the greedy life, the miserable life that he has lived. And justice as well, that we get a sense of justice from this. Like, it's mean what happens to Scrooge, but Scrooge has been mean to other people. So, none of his friends, none of the other people want to attend his funeral. And they say, you know, well, I'll go if there's a free lunch, I suppose, but otherwise I don't want anything to do with Scrooge. Then there's the people who rob Scrooge as he's dying, and they even steal like his curtains from his bedroom and everything. Like, it's really tragic. But again, he's always sort of stolen from others in a sense. He's been greedy. He hasn't wanted to give anyone anything. He's stolen from Bob Cratchit to some extent because he's given Bob Cratchit these terrible working conditions. So he sort of deserves it. The judgment and the justice, he sort of deserves it if he doesn't change his ways. And then he's also, you know, presented with an uncared for, untended grave, and it's his own grave. And, you know, it's all covered in grass and weeds and no one's been there for ages. But he reveals back that the tombstone has his own name. And this fear and judgment and this warning from the Ghost of Christmas Future, it really shows the ending of Scrooge's transformation, because he is down on his knees and he's begging. He's like, please, Spirit, and he's weeping, similar to what we see in this depiction here. So he is really, you know, he's upset and he's scared. So there's that as well, the Ghost of Christmas Future. Now, I'm going to just generally give you quotes from the ghosts. So I'll try and explain which are which quotes are from which ghosts. But if the ghosts come up, presentation of the ghosts, it's pretty likely that it will be the ghosts generally. There's a chance that they'll pick out one ghost as the exam board, but it's more likely they'll just sort of talk about the significance of the ghosts in the story. And that's the model paragraph that I'm going to write for you at the end of this session as well. But let's look through some quotes together. So, you were always a good man of business. Scrooge still has a lot to learn at this point. So he's talking to Jacob Marley. And at this point, there's a pride in his business skills. So Scrooge's mindset at the beginning, when he first sees the ghost of Marley, Jacob Marley, is, but why are you in hell, Jacob? You were a good businessman. So in his head, being a good businessman, making money was the important thing, even to making it to heaven or something like that. So that's quite interesting. The fact that at the beginning, he is right before the transformation, he thinks that being skilled in business is something you should be proud of. And even if you screw other people over, who cares, basically? That's his viewpoint at the beginning. Mankind was my business, Marley says. And what is funny is that this is then what we call sort of a juxtaposition with what Scrooge has said, because he realizes Jacob, now that Jacob is dead and he's in the afterlife and in hell, really, he realizes that actually his business should have been mankind. He should have been trying to be kind to mankind, kind to people, caring to people, but he didn't. As a business owner, and we see that in this picture here, which I'll maybe make a little bit bigger as well, he's bound up in chains, and there are money boxes and other sort of things related to cash that are weighing him down because he made money his business when he should have made people his business. And obviously this links to the fact that that's what happens to Scrooge in the end. Scrooge realizes that mankind really is his business, and he changes, and it's a Christmas miracle. A jolly giant who bore a glowing torch with a cheery voice and a joyful air. So this is a physical description of the Ghost of Christmas Present. And with this quote here, I think that you would look at the adjective choices: cheery voice, joyful air, and maybe the verb glowing torch, and obviously jolly giant. So this is very positive physical description of him. And as I said, he represents the abundance and joy of Christmas. So it makes sense that the physical description of him is also abundant and joyful and pleasant. If these shadows remain unaltered by the future, the child shall die. This is the Ghost of Christmas Present. So just because the Ghost of Christmas Present is one of the more joyful, pleasant ghosts, doesn't mean that he isn't still there to warn and transform Scrooge. So the fact that he says, if these shadows remain unaltered, the child shall die. So this imagery is incredibly negative, right? Negative imagery, basically telling Scrooge off, saying, look, you're in the shadows right now, dude. If you don't work this out, then you're going to be with Jacob Marley. You're going to be in hell. And it's very blunt as well. It's quite blunt language. Short clauses, very blunt. So he can be quite forceful, the Ghost of Christmas Present, the same as the others. This boy is ignorance and this girl is want. Beware them both. Again, this comes from the Ghost of Christmas Present. So these are what we call personifications. And the Ghost of Christmas Present is trying to warn Scrooge, saying, look, at the moment, your focus in life is ignorance. You're being ignorant to what you should be doing. You're a human being. You should be helping other human beings. You're not doing that at the moment. You're just helping yourself at the expense of others. And you're also you're greedy. You're constantly looking for more for yourself. So look, don't be these children. Don't be a boy of ignorance. Don't be a girl of want. Yeah. So it makes it more real for Scrooge. So there's another good quote. So many more to go through. So I should like to be able to say a word or two to my clerk just now. That's all. Scrooge here, this is when he's talking to the Ghost of Christmas Past. He's starting to realize the error of his ways. He's starting to realize, actually, I should be nicer to Bob. So this is part of that initial transformation. And he says this after he has seen himself as an apprentice with Fezziwig. So Fezziwig, that big party, Fezziwig is a model of what a businessman or business owner, should be. And in this time, I say businessman because in Victorian time, mostly it was businessmen. But he was a good boss to Scrooge. And now Scrooge starts to regret the way that he treats Bob. And it doesn't even make sense because Bob is like so weighed down with his big comforter and so freezing cold. His hands are probably numb as he's trying to write things, that it's not even good for Scrooge's business to treat Bob badly. Whereas he watches himself and he's full of energy and life. And the reason for that is because his boss, Fezziwig, was really good to him. So that's a great quote for that. Just him learning that lesson, realizing he needs to be a better person. He needs to be a better boss. A small matter that makes these folks so full of gratitude. Now, this is a very interesting quote because this is the Ghost of Christmas Past telling Scrooge that you don't have to spend a lot of money to make people happy. And the Ghost of Christmas Past almost sort of tricks Scrooge a little bit here. He's like, why is everyone, yaying for Fezziwig? And then Scrooge instinctively defends Fezziwig and says, Fezziwig has the power to make us happy or sad. It's not the money, it's the attitude, what we might call the heart posture. So this again is really important for Scrooge's transformation. The fact that the Ghost of Christmas Past almost sort of tricks him into making himself realize, I have the power to be a nicer person to everyone and to my worker. Why am I not doing this? You weigh everything by gain. This is from the Ghost of Christmas Past. This is when his fiancée Belle is leaving him. And it's a painful memory for Scrooge. So the Ghost of Christmas Past, again, one of the more pleasant sort of ghosts in a sense. Marley is much more scary. Ghost of Christmas Future, much more scary. But that doesn't mean that what the Ghost of Christmas Past shows Scrooge isn't hard for him to see. And again, he's showing him things to try and help him to transform and get better. Finally, well, actually, I've got a couple more. Final one on this page, though. He was concealed and shrouded in a deep black garment concealed its head and face and left nothing visible, except its outstretched hand. So this is a vivid negative description of Christmas Future, Ghost of Christmas Future. And we see here some really negative choices. We've got deep black garment. The color black often is related to mystery, evil sometimes. In this case, it's quite scary and intimidating. Shrouded as well. He's shrouded. If you're shrouded, you're kind of covered, so you can't really see the Ghost of Christmas Future. All you can sort of see is his outstretched hand. This would be pretty terrifying. Imagine in the middle of the night in the darkness, all you see is someone in like black robes and their hand reaching out to you. Terrifying. So again, that links to that vivid negative description of the Ghost of Christmas Future is meant to help to show that this is fear, this is judgment, this is change your ways now, Scrooge, before it's too late. Okay, couple more. These are both also from Ghost of Christmas Future. So a churchyard overrun with weeds, the growth of vegetation's death, not life, a worthy place. So you've got the exclamation mark there. You've got the very, again, negative imagery and its connotations. So we see that this is a good, or not good, a fair resting place for someone like Scrooge, who has just been a bad person his whole life, basically. And now this is his death. And it's the cold, hard truth of where his life actions are leading him. Final one, this is, you know, Scrooge, very different when he talks to Marley about, oh, you're just an undigested bit of beef, to now with the Ghost of Christmas Future. Spirit, hear me. I am not the man I was. These are short, simple sentences, and they're very desperate. So again, this is the effect that the ghosts are having on Scrooge. At this ending point, Scrooge is confessing, look, I'm a changed man. I don't want to be the man I was. I'm going to do everything in my power. Please just give me another chance. Okay, that's all we have time for other than the model paragraph to finish. So quick one here. Again, like normal, every lesson I do this to myself. I give myself like 4 minutes, 3 minutes to do this. So I apologize. But I'm also trying to inspire you that if I can do it in 3 minutes, then surely you as mere mortals can do this in 5 to 10 minutes, hopefully. So I will try to include everything. For some of you, the context is not necessary. So just consult your exam board, make sure that you do or don't need context. I will say, even if context isn't part of the mark scheme, it's not going to hurt to put a little bit of context just to sort of show that you've done wider reading on the text, but just don't make it a focal point if context isn't like part of your exam board and your mark scheme. So one of the ways which the ghosts are used significantly in the novel is in their power to transform Scrooge's character. Now, obviously, if I'm talking about transformation, I'm going to look at the past and look at the present for him, or the future for him, right? So initially, Scrooge dismisses the ghost of Jacob Marley as a bit of undigested beef. The imagery here, along with the dismissive tone, suggests that Scrooge has a hardened heart, a hard heart, and doesn't believe in the supernatural, or that he has any afterlife to fear. However, this all changes in the fourth stave, when Scrooge, on his hands and knees, proclaims, "Spirit, hear me, I am not the man I was." In this quote, the short sentences emphasize Scrooge's remorse and desperate tone. He does not want to end up in the situation of a neglected grave. As a reader, we feel some level of remorse for Scrooge. He was a bad man, yet now he genuinely seems to want to change. This is significant because Dickens was, due to his father, went from a comfortable life to one in a boot blacking factory. So Dickens had a lot of respect for working class people, and his literature is often used to try to scare the upper class into transforming into more generous people. So that's that. I really am cutting it close here. Maybe it's blackening. Anyway, why is it doing this? Okay, I can put boot blacking. Fair enough. I think you can use either. Anyway, so that's a model paragraph for you. So you can see how that fits in with the ghost. Feel free to use this or base your ideas off of something like this. Hope that was helpful. If you like the video, leave it a thumbs up. If you have any comments, please comment below. I'll see you next time. Cheers. Oh, always awkward that ending.